Hello, everybody. You might notice there's a change of scenery, maybe even a change of acoustics, and change of look. That's for several reasons. You know, uh, sometimes you just gotta get a good trim, get rid of all the dead ends, and then also just, you know, right now, near where I live, there have been horrible forest fires that have pretty much ravaged my community. So I just, while I'm away, for my safety and, just praying that things don't get worse, I decided to talk about something a little more positive. This is, for the record, no props, no, probably no editing either, and definitely no notes. So this is all off the cuff. This is all just me speaking from what I know and just trying to get across what I'm most familiar with. And I think it would be pretty easy to talk about my music journey. Um, I'm pretty sure anyone who's got a sort of a interest in music that goes beyond just Spotify playlists and just whatever's playing overhead at the grocery store could probably have a bit more of a more careful understanding of how their music tastes came to be. For the record, I am in my early 20s, and so that might be there's a couple of things from my childhood that kind of influence what I like. Now, most folks my age, from what I know, it can be a bit of a mix of what, let's say, folks in the middle of Gen Z would like. For example, I mean, there's loads of people who will just be interested in mostly what's come out recently, or what's up and coming, which that's perfectly acceptable. There's loads of people who can speak volumes better about whatever music's being put out now, but then there's folks who are, I guess, like folks like me where we kind of find an issue in that there's so much old music to go through that we're just kind of too preoccupied with looking in the past. I think I'm probably the most extreme example of that, of folks I know, because there are very few albums post like 2000 or even like mid 90s that I even touch, and I'll get to that, to why I say mid 90s. And it's not for lack of trying. There's a couple of albums like from the last decade or so that I've heard, and I don't think they're any bad. It's just that there's so much old stuff that I've got to go through that I got to at some point, stop, and I can't just stop now and go on to all this new stuff. That's the problem. So I'll take the word of other folks, and like rate your music or whatever to explain. But let's start all the way back in my childhood. Now, my mother is Gen X, so most of the stuff that she would play in the car was from when she was roughly my age, actually. When she was near the end of her college years and moving on to actually having a full-time job. Most of the stuff that I could tell is in her CD collection from that time is mostly like alt-rocky type stuff. So, it's a couple of the albums that were popular at the time. From memory, I think there was Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. I remember there were like a couple Liz Phair albums, and what's her name again? Tori Amos and Belly. And then also stuff like Portishead, and I guess just a teensy portion of the Lilith Fair crowd, and then some other stuff. But after the mid 90s or so, she kind of stopped paying attention to the music scene. I think it's a very clear thing where you can tell, if you were to look at her CD collection, there's kind of a tapering off point after 1994. Like the last couple of albums you'll see there are like G Funk, what is it? G11 Special Sauce, I think it's what it's called. Dummy by Portishead and Weezer's debut. And then after that, I mean, you get a trickling down of like Fiona Apple and Shakira, and that's perfectly fine. And I still enjoy that stuff. That's what was on the car stereo a lot as a kid. Also the Cranberries. What are they called again? Dang it, Cowboy Junkies. It's fairly within that window. Like at the very oldest, like latest 80s to like early 90s. So that was what my bedrock was. But then right around when I was like 8 years old or so, was when my mother started taking me over to Amoeba Music in Hollywood. And this is the old location of Amoeba, because that old location, I don't know why they moved it off, but that's one where it used to have 2 floors, and the second floor had all the DVDs and stuff. Yeah, that is where my mother would mostly go to buy compilations. Which, I think there's some bands where if you want to kind of get someone acquainted with their sound or whatever, sometimes the greatest hits wouldn't hurt. So, got, a compilation of the Kinks, and I'm pretty sure there was an Al Green compilation she got from there, and of course the Beatles' Blue album. And so I started it started getting a little more entrenched in my head, like, oh yeah, this is what these guys sound like or whatever. And then also some other comps, like, a greatest hits of Ray Charles that was like 3 CDs long or something like that. Just amazing. I've not touched it in a while. But I would say, most of this stuff would just kind of be on constant rotation up until like I was in middle school. I can't really put a pin on what the heck I was actually listening to around my later middle school years. I guess some other comps that would be worth mentioning is the abridged versions, by the way, the abridged versions of Greatest Hits of the Eurythmics and Greatest, Best of Bowie, which I was shocked to learn were like, I think Best of Bowie's like 2 CDs long actually, and then Best of the Eurythmics is the Greatest Hits Eurythmics is like 20 tracks long or something like that. It was way more than what was on our abridged CDs, which is a real bummer, because I would have loved to have heard maybe a little more David Bowie, like more of the David Bowie tracks that were on the full version than what you get on the abridged version. They don't even have They don't even have anything beyond Heroes for the Berlin trilogy, so it feels like a scam, really. So once I go into high school, that's when I start to have a little more of a freer internet access. That's when I'm starting to go beyond what my mother's putting on the stereo, and that's when I'm starting to actually look for what I want and become a little more curious about other folks. And where I started with around the summer of 2018, when I was in that intermediate stage between going from sophomore year high school into junior year, is when I made my Spotify account. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Spotify. It can be really annoying trying to find certain albums, and sometimes it's really annoying whenever albums get taken off just without warning, and you're just like, nads, don't have it anymore. So that's the one thing that really peeves me about Spotify. But what's really helpful about Spotify, and I guess YouTube as well, is that you're able to find just thousands of artists' works just on full display for free. And from there, it was just there was no stopping me. Most of the stuff, like most of the way I consume music, though, is I wouldn't really listen to full albums. At the time, it was more so, going for like a best of playlist that Spotify had made for a certain band, like the Flaming Lips, or I guess David Bowie. Well, the Flaming Lips is the one I'd listened to a lot. Like This Is Flaming Lips is one I'd listened to a lot back then. But it was then a little later on when I do not know actually when I started to warm up to listening to full albums. I think, and this is something that I kind of feel embarrassed about saying, but I think I started actually listening to full albums when I got curious about the discography of Marilyn Manson. I don't think I consider myself a fan of Marilyn Manson anymore. I'm several years removed from all this, so it just feels really weird thinking that I was actually that into his music. But it was enough where I actually started viewing albums as something to enjoy in whole rather than just a selection of songs I could just yoink one track out of and just put on a playlist, which that's kind of my thing now. I don't even really like songs on Spotify anymore, or put them on playlists unless the urge really comes out. But what will happen later on is right around like the middle of senior year of high school in 2020, it happens, and so everybody's inside and everybody's just kind of stuck with a whole lot of nothing to do. And being me, I was just sitting back and just being like, all right, here's time to just listen to as much music as possible. At the time, in let's say late, like in 2019, 2020, was just after I'd started, reading it, and just digesting the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure franchise. I'm not as tapped into it anymore as I used to be, but I will say I'm thankful that it exposed me to a whole lot of artists that I would have probably found a lot slower, which, that's just what happens. The music references could be okay, but there were certainly a couple of mainstays, you could say. And in senior year, there were two tracks that kind of cemented themselves in my head. Like, I think I'd be taking these to the grave, and that would be Tarkus by Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the whole suite, all 20-something minutes of it. Just from the beginning of Eruption to Aqua Tarkus, just all the way through. I memorized that. It is incredible. And then Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield, particularly the second part. I could almost memorize the entirety of the second part because it is just, it's got some of the most just bizarre sounds in it, and there's a lot of melodies that I really like, and just these really sort of odd moments. And I could even say those actually kind of acclimated me to getting used to listening to longer pieces. Of course, I haven't listened to something over 30 minutes yet, but I would say that listening to tracks that kind of go on beyond 20 minutes, it does kind of condition you to have a bit more patience for some tracks. And it's also, it kind of gave me a little bit of patience for double albums where each side is a track, just one track, like Tales from Topographic Oceans and Bitches Brew. Not to say that I fully got those ingrained in my head, but I'm working towards it. So moving on to lockdown, I had a lot more free time, and most of the music I was actually getting into around that time was, let's say, 70s, 80s heavy metal. I was sort of picking up on the classics, let's say. I remember around that time I was checking out a lot of CDs over at my local library of like Metallica, Black Sabbath, Iron Maiden, maybe like one Rainbow CD here. I'm trying to remember who else I was checking out, but eventually when I really couldn't check out anything from the library and I had to just do with Spotify, I had to just make do with Spotify. That's when I really got ingrained with it. That's when I started spending more of my time just listening to albums over and over again. And there's a couple of albums that have really kind of stuck with me through that time, where I can distinctly say I remember it from that time. Such examples would be like Never Say Die by Black Sabbath, Difficult to Cure by Rainbow. Let's see, there's probably Somewhere in Time by Iron Maiden. Just all these wonderful albums that I was just hearing over and over again because I was just bored out of my mind, and wasn't really a whole lot to do outside in the world because things were getting a little hairy. And then around, let's say, and also, a thing I did a lot in 2020 was I kind of pushed myself in listening to music. I wouldn't just listen to one particular album, but there are some times where I felt like I can't just listen to one album. I gotta listen to the whole dang discography. And there was a couple of artists who I did that pretty successfully with, I'd say. Black Sabbath was one of them. Blue Oyster Cult, Deep Purple, Rainbow. There was a failed attempt with Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention combined. There was a failed attempt with Hawkwind. It's what happens sometimes. Someday I might get to listening to Frank Zappa and also what he did with the Mothers of Invention, just in one fell swoop. But that'd take a whole year of planning and setting aside a bunch of other stuff that I would usually listen to. So that's kind of on the back burner for now. Hawkwind could be done, but I'd also have to probably set it off for like a year or so. I don't do artist discography binges as much as I used to. They take a lot of time, and the way I listen to albums has also changed much more. Because before, when I would, my dog in the background, but before when I would listen to albums, I would only listen to them about once and then just kind of move on. But that's not really productive if you want to actually listen to music. You have to go in. First, I think that the best thing to do, if you want to listen to an album, is you need to have that drive. You need to have that urge to listen to it. It can be because of the cover, or it could be because of hype. Someone tells you, oh, this is really great, you should listen to it. It'd be that, someone who's older than you or a friend. And then sometimes you just need or sometimes all you need is just something you just do on a whim, and that's what happens sometimes. And also another detail that I forgot, speaking of Frank Zappa, I think it was around, I want to say it was like when I was in sophomore year of high school or so, was when a friend of my mother's from Idaho had came down, I forget where, it was somewhere by the coast, and we went out for lunch, and he told me to check out this track by Frank Zappa called Peaches and Regalia. And this is because he was wearing a Dweezil Zappa t-shirt, and I thought, this sounds interesting, I'll give it a listen. And I don't particularly remember if I liked it upon listening to it at first, but I remember it sounded very interesting, very strange and instrumental. And then I remember slowly but surely over the years just listening to it over and over again, all those melodies and just crazy little complex orchestrations in there just had me hooked. It's one of those tracks that I would say also I would take to the grave. It's absolutely essential to me. And then, so doing all these discography binges, I eventually stumbled across, /MU's sort of essential albums, which, stuff like In the Court of the Crimson King, Godspeed, what is it? That one, Godspeed You, Black Emperor album, Remain in Light by Talking Heads, all those Animal Collective albums, just dozens and dozens of albums where it was just so much music I could go off from like the 90s up to the 2010s, and then beyond back into the like late 60s up until the 80s. And I was just going through this, and let's say late 2020, early, mid 2021 or so. I think I continued up until 2022, but by then I just kind of moved on to something else. And that was 1001 Albums You Must Listen to Before You Die. I'm kind of okay with that book. There's a couple of entries that I do think are like glaring omissions. I think if you were to check like other lists of like best albums of X decade or whatever, there's a couple where you could smell that they probably shouldn't have omitted it. But I think generally, if you want to just sort of build a foundation for a love of music, or just seeing what you like, there's a lot to enjoy from there. Lots of genres explored, and lots of artists covered. And so the way I wanted to do it is I didn't want to stick with just one year after the other, but rather I went with the 1001 album generator, which is fairly alright. It's sometimes it tossed at me stuff that I was already familiar with or whatever, or stuff that I wasn't sure I'd like, and I think that's good. I think if getting out of your comfort zone is okay. And that's where, it happened to me a lot. There were a lot of albums where I wasn't even sure if I'd enjoy them at first. Mostly stuff, from hip hop or funk or R&B, and I ended up enjoying it. And so I had to kind of break that shell of being so much into like essentially dad rock that maybe a little less stuck in my ways, or a little less cagey about other genres, and also just helped me get a better understanding of other decades other than what I was previously just familiar with. I haven't touched it in a while. I haven't touched it since like November 2022, because right around that time is when I did this thing that I'm still chipping away at systematically, and that is this sort of queue of albums that I've accumulated, basically doing like dozens and dozens of albums where I was just curious about them for so long, and I was just like, screw it, we're gonna try to knock these out. And the first couple on that list that I can remember off the dome are Radus Norvegicus by the Stranglers, Ocean Rain by Echo and the Bunnymen, Machine Gun Etiquette by The Damned, 50 Words for Snow by Kate Bush, Raw Power by The Stooges, Heaven in Las Vegas by Cocteau Twins. There's probably dozens more that I'm missing. But what I really liked about this is that it kind of showed that sometimes your sort of presuppositions about certain albums can turn out to be true sometimes. A lot of those albums that I, just kind of listened to on impulse because I was just like, the covers look so damn cool. I mean, a lot of people seem to like this, so certainly they must be good. They turned out to be something I enjoyed. Radus Norvegicus is the reason why I, fell in love with the Stranglers. And there's a whole lot of albums where I was just like, just dozens of albums all across, from this, progressive rock albums, some heavy albums, experimental electronic music, whatever. Just all this stuff that I'd previously seen, like talked about news websites on music, or just listed down on what Google gives you for like the top albums of a certain year. Because I would just do this. I would make charts on Topsters too. Remember when that existed? Where I would just take, I think it was like 60 or so albums from a certain year. I'd plot those all down on a chart, and I would just kind of try to form that would just kind of form a mental image of just what to expect from that year. So there's certain colors and certain just sort of photography or artistic decisions that I can kind of associate with a given year. I don't know if this is something anyone else is as anally retentive as much as I am about it, but it's just something that I just kind of came to kind of have with me in terms of enjoying music. But then around sometime around 2020, yeah, let's say around the late summer 2024, I'd done a couple of discography runs. I was getting a little tired of them because I felt like I was kind of disrupting my listening experience a little too much. I still have that queue of music. It's probably gonna last me until the end of the year, frankly. But around late 2024, I started to follow along with the top 20 albums for each year from 1967 to 1985 still ongoing by the way, by Rate Your Music user Zaragon. He's also on YouTube, but primarily I knew him from Rate Your Music, and then also his website, Jazz Rock Soul, or yeah, Jazz Rock Soul. That's what it's called, which is a pretty decent website, I think, for finding a lot of obscure albums from, late 60s to mid 80s, which is it's just so much stuff. I might not always agree with the picks that he's gotten for a certain year or whatever, but what I'm glad with for some of these is just the fact that I've listened to them in the first place, that it just gave them a chance. So I'm thinking of actually doing a video on my thoughts on the first 3 years that I'm listening to, because it would be like, 60 albums from the 60s, that being 1967, 68, and 69. But I'm still stuck on 1968, and it'll take me a long time to really get my thoughts in, and I'd want to re-listen to some of those just to sort of get my thoughts across nicely. But just, if you were to look at his page and just look at all those albums listed down, it'll sort of paint more of a full picture of some years than others. It'll paint a more full picture of certain years compared to what music journalism sites will usually put down. The more claimed stuff that you'll get like on Rolling Stone or Pitchfork or whatever. Not to diss them, but there are some times where I do kind of feel starved for something a little more outside the box, or outside of critical acclaim that much, because it does get a little claustrophobic. I should also mention, I think it was around, let's say either late 2023 or early 2024 is when I really started to get involved on Rate Your Music. At this point, I've been active pretty much daily, logging down albums, curating lists, just all this stuff that's really not necessary, but it feels important to me to curate essentially what my tastes are, just to show to the world. I'm slowly writing reviews, but reviews take time, and I only really want to review stuff that I actually care about, or that I feel like I have something to say, because I don't want to feel like I'm just sticking myself out there talking out of my ass. I don't want to and I don't want to make make a whole lot of enemies. But that's not to say I don't want to play it safe. There's a couple of albums where I feel like I'm not too particularly jazzed about, that maybe some people like, but whatever you see on Rate Your Music for me, by the way, that's all my opinion. It's not objective. It's not what the masses have to say. So, because I'm just one person. I'm just one individual in a world of 8 billion other people. You can't really, or however many more people there are in this world, I am not the only one to talk about all this stuff. And whether I'll consistently talk about music on this channel or whatever is entirely up to me. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of guts and particularly knowledge. I don't want to seem like a poser. I don't want to, put myself in the position of talking about stuff I don't want to talk about. I want to be passionate about this, and I just wanted to put this out as just sort of an understanding of just like where I come from whenever I talk about like musical topics or whatever, or just the sort of background I have, and that whatever opinions I have also might not be final. There's a couple of albums that over the years I've changed opinions on, and there's some albums I might like now where I might not like them as much later on, but we'll keep that. We'll just kind of keep moving forward, So yeah, I hope this is somewhat of an enjoyable watch. It might be a little scuffed, it might be a little long-winded, and there's probably a lot of things that weren't really as crucial, but I just felt like getting this out there, and I think there will be some people who appreciate it, just generally, because I think music YouTube, which I feel weird about calling it that. The more voices in it, the better. Should I say more original, genuine voices. I don't want to be an original, genuine voice. I want to be able to talk about how I really feel about things and show that however I feel about something is just how it is for me. And if there's certain other perspectives that we might have that are a little different, that's okay. In any case, I hope this was enjoyable, and I hope you folks are staying safe and doing well, and I'll see you next time.